Welcome to the third episode of Seriously No BS, a hard talk on education. I'm Robert Bob Davis with Dr. Elizabeth Taylor. Today we have a hard talk regarding the educational industrial complex and the wealth building that comes with that. As of the most recent data, there are approximately 49.4 million students enrolled in K through 12 schools in the United States. However, we're going to look at some data for California, since it is one of the largest states with a diverse student population. Now, as of 2022 and 2023 school year, the K through 12 student population was about 5.85 million students in California. And the cost to educate a student from K through 12 grade varies each year based on several factors, including state budgets and funding formulas. Now, for the 23-24 school year, the average per pupil funding in California is estimated to be around $17,658. For 2023 and 2024 school year for California, K through schools was approximately $108 billion.
That's a massive amount of money. Do we know where and why and how this money is spent, Bob?
And this is the part where I want to get into educational wealth building.
But before you do that, before you go there, can you go back a little bit and tell me exactly how is that 17.658 broken down and spent? Where does that money go?
It's a lot of money. And we have to realize that money is budgeted per student in the state of California, in other states also. So what we know that money is based upon average daily attendance for California. That money is sent to the school districts for the education there. Now, take, for example, like a state of Arizona, where they have the voucher system. Now, if I was a parent and I wanted my child to go to a private school or some other school that's paid, I own that $17,000.
You as a parent.
Yes, I own that money.
Yes.
And I think that's great because if I'm unhappy with my child's school, the state allows me to take that money and apply it to my child's education, which I think that should
be another school.
In another school
That
or a
is
private
amazing.
school.
I did not know that. Yes.
Right. So I think it's, and many of these states that are really more controlled by the teachers' unions, of course, teachers' unions don't want to do that. Because then that gives the parent and the child all the power, which they should have. And we're going to talk more about how that money should be spent. And that's why I want to talk about educational wealth building and who's benefiting from that.
Okay, good.
So, wealth building within the K through 12 educational system, particularly when discussing the use of funding for their own gains, can raise significant ethical and legal concerns. Now, here we look at how educational entities are misusing funding under the guise of helping students.
Yes.
So let's look at the pay raises for just school administrators over the last 5 years. School administrators in California have experienced a consistent salary increase averaging 3 to 4% and sometimes higher annually. Now, I counter that with a flat line or decline in standardized test scores. Grades have not improved, but increases in pay continue to rise. And the same can be said for teacher raises due to heavy teacher unions' active role in teacher increases. So what I'm saying is that even though our grades and our test scores of our students have pretty much flatlined over a number of years or declined, but when you look at a graph, the salaries for these administrators are going up. That doesn't make sense to me. It's like, wait a minute, how does that, how am I giving you, if I'm throwing more money in your pocket, shouldn't my students and the grades and everything get better? And that's what I'm talking about, educational wealth building.
That's a mouthful. So How are students really benefiting from all this? Basically, what you said. And who are the real stakeholders in this miasma? And in addition to that, we do see the increase of charter schools.
Mhm.
How does this scenario that you laid out affect charter schools, or is it the same scenario there?
Well,
Similar.
charter schools are public funded schools,
Yes.
right? So the monies that would go to the school district would go to the charter school. And within a charter school in California, there needs to be an approval process
Right.
by the school
Right.
districts, and
Yes.
it's very difficult to get a charter approved in California,
Okay.
just because of the teachers unions
Mm-hmm.
really oppose that because they say you're taking jobs
Mm-hmm.
and students
Mm-hmm.
away.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they're going to say that
Mm-hmm.
because for every student that attends that public school, they get that $17,000.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a business model that they don't
Yes.
want to give up.
So it's the same thing with the charter school and the public. Money is being pumped into the schools
Yes.
per child
Yes.
to educate that child. Then that the parent also can control in either scenario.
Well, in California, they can't do that. The
Okay,
law will not
okay,
allow
okay,
parents because they
okay.
don't have a voucher
Okay,
system.
I see.
Now,
Okay,
many people want that, but
Mhm,
the legislature
mhm.
has to approve that.
Okay,
So with
okay.
the heavy presence of teachers unions, I don't think that will ever
I
happen in
see.
California.
So given the scenario of public and charter schools, who is really benefiting? Going back to my question, who really benefits from this scenario?
Well, we
This
have to look at
Yes.
the companies that's involved, the private
Okay.
educational companies.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
what comes to mind are the textbook companies that publish these textbooks, and these textbooks are very, very expensive.
Absolutely. Yes.
So in this business model, and in another companies that benefit are the standardized test companies.
Yes.
So we know that students in certain grades have to take a standardized test, right?
Uh-huh.
And
Mhm.
there's a lot of pressure on these kids to pass because that's the results. We say that our kids tested it at this level. But the standardized testing companies are who are the companies that come up with these tests. So they're always
And they're getting money too.
they're being
money
paid.
in their pockets.
They're
Okay.
paying all the
Okay.
time
Yes.
for these
Uh-huh.
companies to receive the monies.
Okay.
And then so if you look at textbooks, same thing there. And I have to really tell you a story. When I was on the school board, we had a textbook company come to sell us brand new textbooks across the board. Those textbooks cost $24 million out of a 20,000 student.
No
And
doubt. Yes.
the only first question that I asked the person making the presentation, I asked, has a student looked at this or a parent? And what was their answer?
Or a teacher.
No.
Yes.
So you're asking me to spend $24 million on a product that the student has never even looked at before.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so that
Yeah.
I wasn't in the majority, but the measure did pass.
Yes.
But $24 million, think
Yes.
about that, how
Yes.
expensive that is.
Let me tell you my story about that.
Okay.
I taught in Saudi Arabia,
Hmm.
and I taught at the graduate level in Saudi Arabia, and I was the dean of the program there. I ran the program. I had 12 faculty members, but we had a textbook issue there.
Mhm.
Every semester, we were required to use textbooks that were pre-prescribed for our classes. The teachers didn't order them, I didn't ask for them, but someone higher up said, you must use these textbooks for this class. It was very problematic because the textbooks were not relevant to what was being taught in the classroom, but we had to use those textbooks. So my teachers would complain and say, we can't use these textbooks. The student can't read them. We don't like them. I said, just use PowerPoints. Use PowerPoints. But let me go on to say that companies that produce textbooks and educational materials do have a significant stake in the K through 12 education market. They generate wealth, as you say, by selling their products to schools, which often have to adhere to specific curriculum standards set, again, by state and federal guidelines. Yet, from my experience in the classroom, as I just explained to you, a lot of those prescribed, bought, and paid for textbooks are not relevant to what needs to be taught. And it's clear that money is flowing, but where and to whom, obviously, deals are being made.
Yes, and I agree with that.
Yes.
So when you talk about state mandated curriculum, there you have that bureaucracy, right?
Yes.
And everyone is getting, I call it getting fed, right? All the way down, right?
Yes.
So these textbook companies are very active in campaigns, state legislature, because
mhm,
they want their product to continue to be approved.
mhm,
So they're
mhm,
they're always got their hand in the coffers. So
mhm,
they're always making those, monies coming in.
mhm,
But
mhm,
and then
mhm,
again, it's
mhm,
the standardized testing companies also that's
mhm.
creating these,
Yeah, yeah.
constant tests that is applied there. So and I think as we move forward, we're going to really talk about these standardized tests
Yeah.
because it's a
Yeah.
basis for everything that goes on in education,
Yes.
right? So there's a lot of results there. Again,
Uh-huh.
flatlined, right?
Mhm.
So think
Mhm.
about the business model. You're a
Mhm.
standardized test company, right?
Mhm.
So my belief is that why would you make your product so good that you would never need me again, right?
Uh-huh.
So they're always
Mhm.
changing. They're
Mhm.
always changing
Mhm.
they're
Mhm.
always changing
Mhm.
everything.
Mhm. Mhm.
But the kids are still failing, from the 1980s, we know that standardized testing showed that our schools was failing, our kids were failing, our
So
textbooks were
it's
failing.
just like the textbooks. The tests are not relevant to what needs to be learned or taught.
And you have to ask who's
Yes,
creating
you're
those
right.
questions on those
People who
tests.
want to make money.
Yes, yes. So, I mean, what a business model, right? I'm going to create a
Yes.
business
Mm.
model where you will always need me no matter
Mhm.
what.
Mhm.
Not only
Mhm.
that,
Mhm.
but I have the state legislature on my side that
Yes.
says you
Yes.
do need me. You
Yes.
do have to have
Yes.
a state mandated curriculum.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
what I look at is that this money that's going to all these private educational should be going into the classroom,
Directly
should
into the
be going right
classroom. Yes.
into the
Or to the school structure.
yes,
Yes. Yes.
yes,
Overall
and
structure.
right,
Yes.
right. And
Uh-huh.
that's why these schools are just so beholden to these testing
These
companies.
companies and textbook companies. It's a scam.
Let's just
Okay.
call it the way it
It's
is,
it's
right?
a big scam.
Right,
It
right,
really is.
right.
Uh-huh.
And there's
Yes.
this money that turns over,
Mm-hmm.
but it comes down to the end of the day. Look at
Mm-hmm.
the results, and
Mm-hmm.
the results are dismal.
Schools are
Right,
failing.
right,
Children
right.
are not
Our
learning.
our test
Reading and
scores,
writing scores are
yes,
going
yeah,
down.
yeah.
It's
And I
it's
think we
yes.
talked about, dumbing
Yes.
down, right?
Dumbing down.
Since
Yes.
our kids
Yes.
aren't
Uh-huh.
achieving the C's, let's make a D the average score from
Yes,
now on,
yes, yes,
right?
yes, yes. Uh-huh.
But I think another area that we're going to really get into is, what's the impact on these kids taking these standardized tests? How are we explaining these testing models to the kids when they sit down and take these
Yeah.
tests?
Yeah.
And going forward, I share some of my own experience with testing also, which
Well,
creates a lot of issues.
well, okay.
So
Which goes back to what we said at the beginning of the show. What is bullshit? What purpose does it serve?
yeah,
What evidence does it have? And
absolutely.
can it stand up on its own merit? And I
Yeah.
would say that standardized testing does not meet that criteria.
And I agree. It's
Yes,
all BS.
it's all BS.
But
It really
you
is.
have to ask, people getting fed, and we're
Hmm.
going to talk more about
Yes,
that
yes.
as we go
Hmm.
forward. So
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to having a little bit deeper BS
Going deeper.
conversation.
The Alpha Wearable from Anywhere Healing is a personal wellness device you wear on your wrist, like a watch. Using advanced bioresonance technology, it boosts energy, reduces stress, and promotes natural healing. Elevate your well-being with the Alpha Wearable. Get yours today with a 10% discount when you order from hatsif.net. That's HATSF.net. Click the link on the HATSIF homepage and start your journey to wellness today.
Welcome back to Seriously No BS, a hard talk on education. The only way to feed a business model is to perpetuate a picture of failure. It would be interesting to meet any of these private education companies that has a business model that is built upon long-term student success. Just think about it. There really is no money in long-term student success. Companies like the College Board, which administers the SAT, and the ACT Incorporated, earn substantial revenue from administrating these tests, as well as from related products such as test preparation materials and courses. There are other educational entities that are connected to the complex of educational technology companies, teacher training, professional development companies, school infrastructure and service organizations. These are the main entities that are beneficiaries of the monies that could be diverted to students in the classrooms. These companies raises the questions about the commercialization of education and the potential impact on education equity and quality.
Absolutely. Have you heard of the heads I win, tails you lose model?
I like to
That's
hear
what we're
more
talking about here.
yeah,
Heads I win, tails you lose,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, and a component of that these companies fail to address based on that premises, especially with the testing companies, is the mental health component in education.
Yeah.
We must address the issues of stress, anxiety, trauma, and suicide that's related to the effects of that testing has on these students, and the exercise of striving and striving and striving to succeed and pass the test, and constantly not meeting the mark. I mean, that can wear on you consciously,
No,
you mentally. Absolutely.
absolutely.
It has an effect there,
Yeah, yeah,
which
and,
may be intended.
yeah,
You know.
and I believe that that's a component. The mental health component really has not been addressed due to with the standardized testing companies. They're just
Mhm.
interested in creating these tests, not really
Not the
looking at
outcome,
the
the qualitative
impacts.
outcome of it.
Right, right.
Right. Yes.
So, one thing that we really need to look at is that stress and anxiety over these test taking materials.
Yes.
And
Yes.
for example, I was never a good test taker, right? And anytime that there a mention of a test and everything the night before or whatever, I just had these, my stomach would just move around. And I sat and I tried to memorize everything. Then I got in the test and I couldn't remember anything. And I think we talked about that earlier, is that stress, it stops that focus, right?
It does. It does. It does interfere with it. Yeah.
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 So, in my case, I failed many tests, but when I walked out of the test, it's like, I knew that answer. Why couldn't I answer it?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so what we're finding, and there's some studies with even like third graders,
Mhm.
the amount of stress and anxiety
Mhm.
that these small kids are dealing with.
Mhm.
It's impactful,
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
impactful.
Mhm.
So, it's
Mhm.
affecting
Mhm.
the mental health of these students as they move along.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
in these standardized testing, basically, I believe that they're really using these students just for pawns in the game
Pause the game.
to say we need more money applied to this.
I would even venture to say that I would be opposed to the whole notion of testing in general, and maybe moving more towards something like an assessment model, so that you're not having to come into a classroom and over a designated, concise period of time have to answer prescribed questions to pass and to be evaluated and judged based on how you did in that prescribed amount of time, but just to have a more casual, easygoing, relaxed
Mhm.
assessment model that takes into the overall emotional reaction of the student to this whole process.
Yeah, and that's
That has to be taken into consideration.
and you're
Yes.
absolutely right.
Yes.
And that's one model that I really want to introduce in the new
Some
way.
assessments or something like that.
The new way
Do
of
away
doing
with the
things
test altogether.
is that what we
Yes.
do know in studies and science shows that these kids, they spend days and days just memorizing, right?
Stressing. Oh, yes.
And then
Yes.
they take the
Yes.
test, and there's been studies done where at these higher level schools, as they come back into the fall, they give the same test to the students. They all failed,
They all
right?
fail.
Makes
Yes.
sense, right?
Uh-huh.
So my model is based upon proficiency,
Mhm.
right?
Proficiency.
Everyone learns differently.
Yes.
Everyone
Absolutely.
learns at a different pace, right?
Absolutely.
So why
Yes.
aren't we moving to more of these models of proficiency, right? So when I go through the learning process and everything, instead of trying to take a test, I get up and I present my material, right?
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes. Mhm.
there's even schools that are showing where younger kids, first, second, third graders, they get up and present their work, right? And what does that do? You're able to talk about what you've learned.
When you are relaxed and at ease, you are better able to learn and
Mhm.
to divulge what you have learned.
Yeah,
To
so-
be a part, to have a better learning experience. And somehow that whole psychology is not worked into our understanding of how we are educated.
Right. And think
Yes.
about what grades do, right?
Yes.
Grades a label. right?
It is a label.
Right,
It
right.
is a label.
I
And
mean,
test scores are labels also.
absolutely. So
Yes.
once a kid gets
Stop
labeled,
labeling.
I'm a
Yes.
A student, no, I'm an F student.
Or I failed the test and
What
you did na na na
what does
na
that
na.
mean,
Yes.
right?
Right.
And we know that
Uh-huh.
failure in
Right.
education is good. The more you fail, the more successful you're going to be.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. Yeah.
my belief is that we move away from grades. There's no reason to
Move away
apply
from
a grade,
grades,
right?
but especially testing.
Yeah, especially
Yes.
testing. And
Yes.
it's all about proficiency because we know kids learn at different paces,
Yes.
right?
Right.
And why not let some kids get ahead for what they're doing and some kids stay where they need to be until they understand the material.
Right.
So we're
And
asking these kids to take these tests that's putting so much pressure on them.
And somewhere along the line, we have to figure out a way to convince the power brokers to be who are making a killing on this scam that this is a better way to
Yeah,
go about it. And
yeah.
and if we do go about learning and testing in this way, they can still make their money.
Oh
You
no,
know, but then it will be like more like a win-win situation where the
Yeah.
students don't lose and they win,
Mhm,
something
mhm.
like that.
Yeah.
That's where some work needs to be done
But
as well.
we were talking about the mental health component of this is that
Mhm.
what we do know is that the suicides
Oh,
from
yeah.
in our
Yes.
youth has just been increasing more and more, right?
Mhm.
For many different
Mhm.
reasons and the
Mhm.
trauma
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
surrounded about that.
Yes.
But these even these students that are at the high level, right? These 4.0 students, a lot of those students end up committing suicide because there's so much pressure on them to perform. And when they don't perform, some of these kids will come home with a B and they're distraught. They're distraught for days and months because they didn't achieve that A grade, right? Think of what that means, A grade, right?
I can tell you some horror stories about my experiences about the A, the fight for the A grade in Saudi Arabia, but I'll leave that for another time. But I do think that when we talk about students learning, that we have to take into consideration the quality that we create for them in the learning environment. But right now it's all about quantity. We also have to think about the effect of social media on students. And so we got the testing, we got the books and all that stuff, but there's also the social media component that fits in where their friends are now, everyone knows who's passing and who's failing. Everybody knows. You're just like you're on stage, you're under the flashlight. And that's a factor as well. Is how do we manage that
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
classroom? Is control that.
and social
That's where a
media is
lot of suicides come from. Is
social media is a
social
whole
media
different
pressure.
animal,
It's a whole
right?
different animal.
But
Yes.
kids get on social media and these kids that are failing these classes, they become the brunt. They get bullied,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes,
So
yes, yes.
everyone talks about, oh, he's the dummy in the class, or she's the dummy or whatever. But the mental health impact is what I'm concerned the
It
most.
is. It's
That's
important.
associated with these grades.
Are those numbers growing, increasing, and
Yes.
those in mental health
Yes,
of
yes,
students?
yeah.
Of
We're
students?
we're seeing just an increase in mental
Yes.
health issues,
Yeah.
suicide
Of suicides, of
issues.
course, we are
And
seeing that.
We're
Yes.
talking about younger kids,
Younger,
and
younger suicides.
younger and younger, right? And there's a lot of things associated with that, but grades has a big impact.
Yes.
And those grades, those whatever those labels, like we've talked about, can stay with a kid forever into their adult life, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
create those blocks.
That in addition to whatever teacher's behavior we talked about in a prior episode about naming them, labeling them as stupid and is not capable or whatever, all of this just compounded on many students.
I mean, it goes back to the example we talked about with me
Yes.
with my
Yeah.
counselor saying I was
Yes.
stupid.
Mhm.
What we don't know, we don't know what that kid is bringing to school with them, right? What they just saw or what they just experienced,
Yes.
the trauma around that. And we're expecting this kid that was sleeping on someone's couch last
Come
night,
in and take a
or
test.
they may
Yes.
be sleeping in their car, or they may be homeless,
Yeah.
or it could be anyone, any
Yeah.
factors, right?
Yeah.
That this
Yeah.
trauma is being induced from. But we're asking kids to come in, sit down,
take a
take a
test,
test,
pass it.
right? And pass it, right? So, and
Yeah.
we know at
Yeah.
the end of
Obey
the
the rules
day,
and all that.
you know,
Read these textbooks that they cannot really decipher. Yes, and
yeah,
all that.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just a
So,
very stressful environment that we create for young people.
yeah.
Very
So, I mean,
stressful
we really
learning
have to
environment.
look at that.
Yes.
And,
Hmm.
are we going to continue going down the same road in this traditional educational
I
model?
think that the work that we're doing here may make some progress here. We
I,
may put a glimmer of light in this shadowy picture
yeah,
here.
I
I
hope
like to
what
think
we're
that we're doing
sharing,
something
yeah,
useful to contribute to
yeah.
progress and
Yeah, yeah,
changes
yeah.
in
And
this.
I hope
Yes.
with what we're sharing, people get
Hmm.
engaged with what we're
Yes.
talking about
Yes.
and can
Yes.
identify with that.
Yes.
And I just
Yes.
believe there's not only thousands, there's probably millions of people out there that has had this experience and
Yes.
just never really had a
Uh-huh.
an area to open and talk about
To
this.
have a
But
dialogue
it
about it.
needs to
Yes.
be
It
talked
needs to be
about
talked about.
and what's
Yes. Yes.
driving this. And
Yes.
I really believe it starts in that classroom
It starts in the
with
classroom.
these with the amount of testing, the amount of standardized testing, and the results
And the results.
that we
Yes.
get, and then the
Yes.
labeling that goes with
Hmm.
that.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I really believe that we need to do more. So when we come back from our commercial break, we'll be talking more about this and really get into it. So we'll see you on the other side.
A single woman walks a difficult path in the Middle East. An experienced American educator, Dr. Elizabeth Taylor boldly took on the challenge and lived and worked 5 years in Saudi Arabia. Under the Abaya is a rare, close-up, and intimate report on the young women she taught and mentored, and also the country they hope to change. This book is perfect for anyone interested in the Middle East and wants a personal, inside look at the changing Saudi Arabia. Independent women and the men who respect them will find special pleasure in Dr. Elizabeth Taylor's candid account of her tribulations and triumphs during her 5 years in this mysterious country. Purchase your copy of Under the Abaya today at wisdomtogo.com.
Welcome back to Seriously, No BS, Hard Talk on Education. Dr. Yu, before our break, you brought up your experience in Saudi Arabia. And since we have a global audience, I think the audience out there would like to hear more about that experience, including myself. I'd like to hear more about, the educational system in Saudi Arabia.
Well, as it pertains to testing and grades, I can speak to that. I mean, it's a big story. I was there for 5 years. And I taught, I want to clarify that I taught primarily women because of the way that whole system was set up. Women taught women, men taught men, that kind of thing. So all of my students were females, Saudi females, by and large, which was so different for me. It was just amazing, amazing. You look at the classroom, you go in the classroom as a teacher, and everyone, you see these 30 students all dressed in black and covered up. It's okay, like who's who?
Did you have to dress that way?
I had to wear the abaya as well. I didn't have to
Interesting.
cover my head or anything, but I did have to wear an abaya.
Mhm.
We call it a burqa here, but it's really an abaya over there. So I had to wear my abaya basically, and all my students are dressed in black. It was an amazing scene. Never forget. I will never forget it. So grades was a very important part of their life there. Grades, because those Saudi families wanted their daughters to excel in school, because once they excelled and were able to graduate, they could go on to be wives. They were better marriage partners or potential. They could go on and get jobs because jobs are starting to open up. So it was really a horse race for students to pass their grades and to graduate from college. So when it came to grades, in order to graduate, they had to have 100 marks. We call them marks over there, not grades, like marks, 100, which was points. You had 100 points or marks. So by the end of the semester, if you had 100 marks, you got an A or an A plus, right? And I will tell you that those young women were it was a frenzy to get that A. A C or B was not enough. They had to have the A because they wanted that translated directly into a higher GPA. And the companies were hiring young women
Mhm.
who had higher GPA. So companies
Interesting.
were forcing this issue.
So there was pressures.
There was pressure, real pressure from companies for young women to come to graduate with high GPAs. Those were the cream of the crop when it came to employment. So they had to get that A. Even C students would not accept their C. They'd come to my office and says, Dr. Elizabeth, you gave me a C. Can you change this C to an A? Really, duh. Like I'm gonna just give you a C.
Yeah.
But I have to graduate. I have to get married. I said, honey, this is what you achieved in your in the class. I can't change that.
Mhm.
But it was really a scramble to work with that system. And when it came to testing, oh my goodness. Uh, Again, it was all connected to the grade and the final marks they would get. So testing was we had to request that students, as they entered the classroom to get tested, that they leave all of their purses and handbags at the front of the room. No cell phones, no nothing.
Wow.
They were mostly wealthy students. So you have Gucci, Prada, Dolce Gabbana,
Wow.
Yves Saint Laurent purses, all at the front. And they had to leave that there so that they were totally clean and clear from cheating, because that was an epidemic there. It was an epidemic in the there. So
So did you find that there were some mental health issues that was being talked about, or was it more not being talked about?
mental health was an issue. If I could see that among my students in my classroom or in private conversations with them, but it was not something that was highly talked about and exposed. It was like a shaming kind of thing. But it was certainly there. It was certainly there.
So there was some like a stigma
Stigma.
around
There was a
talking.
stigma around mental health. But I will say that the differences in culture from teaching in the US and teaching in Saudi Arabia were so glaring that I was so inspired that I wrote a book about it. It inspired me to
really?
write my books about it.
And the
Now,
name of your
too,
book
is
is?
Formula 9, and especially under the abaya, under the abaya. But it was just amazing. And one point I want to make about their relationship to authority. Like students here in the United States tend to have a different relationship with authority in the classroom.
Mhm.
Over there, they revered authority. They
Mm.
had no problem with it. No, the teacher was law. The teacher was there, even with the parents. So you got the utmost respect from students over there. No, hardly any pushback at all. Very, very different from what you get here in the United States.
Something that we had back in the 50s and 60s,
Yes.
right? Where
Yes.
teachers was the professional,
Yes,
right?
the teacher was not the bad guy there. The teacher was all pervasive, all, I don't want to say God or anything, but you got the utmost respect from students and their parents because they know that you were the final authority on whether their student would pass or fail that course. So they had to be nice with you. So I got all kinds of gifts and things, candy, chocolates and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was an amazing experience. Yes.
Was there suicides related to education, or just
There were no
social media? Is there
suicides.
social media issues?
There were plenty of social media because they lived on social media.
Okay.
They lived on it, but suicides were not a factor. And I might contribute that to the faith, Islam faith. It might have been contrary. I think it had something to do with that, but no suicides among students. Lots of problems though.
Yeah.
A lot of problems, but no, it's no suicides.
Well, girl, well,
And
thank you for
lots of low self-esteem.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes,
That's,
sure.
that's very interesting.
Sure.
While we're discussing, the youth mental health, I just like to give you some data and statistics. Anxiety disorders here in the U.S. affect about 7% of the children aged 3 to 17. That sounds low, but you look at the number of children there are in the United States, right? That's a pretty high number. And then with depression, that affects about 3% of the children. And I believe that number is actually higher. A word ADHD.
You mean the depression is higher?
I believe
higher
that.
than 3%?
I believe that because, I talked about, there's a stigma around mental health.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Doesn't matter
Yes.
how old you are, right?
Mhm.
And, I've always said this, it's like, if you get sick, if you have a cold or whatever, if you break your arm, right, what do? You go to the
You go
doctor,
to the doctor.
right?
Yes.
You say, I got a broken arm, or I'm sick, I got a cold. You talk about that, right? But if there's something internally going on with this, we're not supposed to talk about that, right? That's that stigma.
It's a stigma.
And it's huge in schools, right?
The stigma of
With
being
the
thought of as
bullying.
crazy or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
Yes.
the kid's crazy, blah, blah, blah,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So it's that stigma that we really have to work through.
So that number must be much higher than 3%.
I
Yes,
believe,
I
yeah,
agree.
yeah,
I agree
yeah,
with that.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I mean,
Mhm,
kids live on
mhm.
social media and
Yes.
the bullying that goes
Mhm,
on
mhm,
with that.
mhm.
But another issue in our schools is ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity, is one of the most common mental disorders affecting about 10% of our kids aged 2 to 17 years of age.
Mhm.
But what's interesting, I keep talking about the new model that I believe in, that I would like to see happen, is that we're asking young kids age 5, 6, 7 years old or younger to come into a classroom, sit at a desk with their hands folded for 6 hours. These kids are full of energy, right?
Absolutely.
What do they want to do? They want to get up, they want to play, they want to run around,
They need to exercise
but
that
they're being
energy.
punished for
Yes.
expressing who they really are, right? So
Absolutely,
ADHD,
yes.
I think, could be solved just like it's playtime, right? We're
Yes.
going to learn
Yes.
this way
Yes.
today,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
I think you see a lot of that going away because
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
constricting our kids,
Mhm,
to
mhm,
make them
mhm.
sit,
Yes.
and that's painful. I
Yes.
can't sit for that long.
I
And
I would agree. I would concur. Yes.
ADHD wasn't, that word was never around
Yes.
when
You
I
have
was
to get up
young.
even at the computer. You have to get up and walk around and get a cup of coffee or take a break or something. So
But I
sitting
was
for
that
6
kid.
hours.
I
Yes.
could not sit still
Mhm,
in a
mhm,
classroom. But
mhm,
we're
mhm.
asking these kids to do that. Then we label them.
We label
Oh,
them.
he's got
Yes.
ADHD. So
Yes.
here's
Yes.
some
Yeah.
medicine, right?
Here's some medicine.
So
Yeah.
we can talk
For
about big
sure.
pharma
For
later,
sure.
but
Yeah.
that's really what's going on.
Mhm.
And something else, in addition to the effects of mental health issues, we need to address the impact of academic performance in relation to mental health. Mental health issues can lead to increases in absenteeism, with students missing school due to anxiety, depression, or other mental health conditions. So students with untreated mental health issues may experience difficulties in concentrating, leading to lower grades and academic performance. And mental health issues can also be attributed to behavior problems, what I was just talking about with ADHD.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
disrupts the learning environments, affecting not only student, but other students in the classroom.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so
Yes.
mental health is being talked about, but not at the level that it needs to be talked about. So I really think we, really focus on that and start addressing those issues from day one.
Right. And with that, who is qualified to do that, Bob? That's my question. To your point, addressing our children's mental health issues is a major issue that the schools are attempting to address. But again, they have been trying to do this with the tools of the past, basically. Teachers are already overloaded,
Yes.
and expected to play various roles and above and beyond that of being a teacher.
Yes.
Remember what we said about teachers quitting? Well, one of the major reasons they're quitting in droves is because they're so overloaded to play different roles, such as dealing with children's mental health. So who tends to the mental health of students? Do we need a modification of the structure of education that has been that might be an in-house therapist or a standard therapist within the school structure? I don't think that is a teacher's job to do, addressing stress, anxiety, trauma, suicide in the context of education. I really don't. And it requires a multifaceted approach that includes mental health support, trauma informed practices, maybe suicide prevention strategies, and a balanced, more balanced assessment tools, not teaching, testing tools necessarily. So by creating a supportive and responsive educational environment, schools can help students navigate these challenges and promote their overall well-being, but not on the shoulders of teachers, not on the shoulders of teachers. And of course, that is going to cost.
Yes.
Yes.
I agree with you very much. Why wait for the holidays? Give yourself the gift of great health and wellness with the Alpha wearable device. Imagine reducing stress, improving sleep, and enhancing your overall well-being. The Alpha wearable uses cutting-edge bioresonance technology to help you feel your best every day. Don't wait for tomorrow. take care of yourself, visit hatsf.net. That's HATSF.net today and start your journey to better health. Yes, there are some new and exciting programs that are designed to address the mental health needs of students. First, starting with trauma or trauma-informed programs. These trauma-informed programs in K through 12 schools are designed to create supportive environments that recognize and respond to the effects of all types of trauma on students, utilizing specific interventions and supports tailored to the needs of traumatized students. Mm-hmm. So trauma is a big thing that's going on in schools.
And we've been talking about that a lot. So maybe what we can do is just go down, is list some examples of what that trauma looks like with mm-hmm, students, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, both what they bring in, what they experience in the classroom, that they bring into, and that they leave the classroom with.
Yeah, that's such a
points
broad,
of trauma.
That's such a broad.
It's so broad.
Right.
Let's color it up a little bit. So trauma is when a child, the bottom line is trauma is anything that's affecting a child mentally, emotionally, to the point where they cannot learn effectively.
Absolutely.
We know
right.
that. We know that.
Right.
But where does that trauma come from? Is it from teachers putting them down, not building them up, but labeling them?
Mm-hmm.
It can be from testing, trauma from testing, trauma from stress going on in the home life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I know as a child growing up in Southside Chicago, I don't think I had a lot of trauma, but I do have some incidences regularly where my parents were fighting, all right?
Mm-hmm.
There was stress in the house, and that got into me, and I had to go to school in the morning after seeing my mother and my father fighting, right?
Yes.
And I remember one time in high school, not in high school, but in elementary school, we were called out of the classroom. The school bell had rung, and we were called out of the classroom, and because some young man had gotten shot on the basketball court.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to end school for that day. But I remember I have to say this, saw my first dead body in my life, and we had to walk through the playground and see that young man lying on the court. That was traumatizing for me.
Yeah.
So trauma comes in many, many, many forms. It could be being the only Black student in a class full of non-Black students, right? What are some areas you see?
Yes, trauma is a word that has really evolved.
Mm-hmm.
It's really become, and there's a lot of meaning to that.
Yes.
I go back with my master's degree in counseling and psychology. The thesis that I wrote was overcoming family violence.
Mm-hmm.
And, I really wrote about the effects on children that come from violent homes, from alcohol and substance abuse homes also.
Yes.
And, that's where a lot of this trauma is being experienced. These kids that their home life is so disrupted, so dysfunctional. And, they're bringing that into the schools. And, the traditional model of schools that, we're here to just do academics. We really don't care what goes on outside the walls of the school. But it's become so apparent now that the home life, the everyday life after school is affecting in-school behaviors.
Yes.
So trauma is wide.
It's
broad.
Yes.
But
ultimately,
we really have to really start working.
We have to, because
it
impedes the students' ability to learn.
Yeah, their academic performance.
And it's visible.
Yes.
It's very visible. Yes. You can see the trauma. You can see it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, kids that are coming from violent and substance abuse homes have a lot of behavior issues.
Yeah.
And we're not dealing with that.
Yes.
The only way we're really dealing with that is to remove the student from the classroom. And that's really not not the right answer, right? So we really have to look at how we deal with that. And instead of at the beginning of the school year starting with academics, we should really be talking about the whole child.
The whole child.
The social emotional
the social emotional life
of the child.
Yes.
And not only that, but every day.
Every day. Like check-ins. Like I like to do check-ins.
Absolutely.
Like, how are you doing today? What do you want to say? What's on your mind? Basically. Yes. It's just, it could be that simple.
And even our teachers and our administrators, they're coming from homes where the marriages, there's
Yes,
issues
yes,
there.
yeah.
They could be bringing their own
They're
home
bringing their own
problems
and transferring it onto students.
and transferring and
Absolutely.
projecting it onto the
Yes,
students.
yes,
So
yes.
it's just
Yeah.
it's an area that's I just don't think that's being addressed in the
It
right
is not.
way.
It is not.
Yeah.
It is not.
So
Yes.
I just think we need to do more
Yes.
to really open that conversation up and make it safe to to talk about these types of issues.
And not a taboo subject.
Yeah, and not a
Yes, to
taboo.
be brushed under the rug or
Yeah,
something.
and
Yes.
and so I think there's many ways that
Yes.
we need to,
Yeah.
but to
Yes.
understand it, I think we need to understand exactly
Absolutely.
what trauma is, what it means. But I think
Because it is increasing.
yes,
It is increasing
yes,
exponentially in
yes,
schools.
yes, yes.
So,
But good. So, as we move forward here, and before we go, I believe we have some words of wisdom to leave you with from Dr. E and Wally Wisdom. And Wally and you's been having some great conversation.
he is so adorable. He is such a cutie. He's my main squeeze,
Okay,
So,
Wally.
literally speaking, squeeze.
All right, Wally.
Well, hello there, Wally.
Well, hi again,
good to-
Dr. E.
It's good to see you again today.
Oh, it's good to see you again today, too.
You're looking quite nice and perky.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I've been told
Yes.
I'm dashing.
You are absolutely dashing, Wally.
Yeah, very fly, some people say.
Dashing. What questions do you have for me today, Wally?
Oh, well, I was just listening in to your podcast today, and I gotta say, you covered some really stressful topics like testing and stuff. My brain's it's going through a loop. Just thinking about it.
I know.
Oh boy, I'm all fried.
I know it's the world we live in. It's the world we live in.
Well,
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And speaking
Yes.
of the world we live in, it's amazing the amount of testing all these American students have to do.
Yes.
But I just was
yes.
thinking about the fact that I read your book Under the Abaya, and it
Oh.
talks about how you went and taught in Saudi Arabia for a few years.
Yes.
Yeah, what was
Yes.
testing like over there? I'm sure it must be grueling.
It was a whole different experience, a very different experience. And I went over there because I wanted to have a different experience. I wanted to see how things happen in another country. I wanted to broaden my horizons, so to speak, and it's a big, you know what, Wally? It's a big world out there.
Oh, I
It's
bet.
huge. And being out there was wonderful because it expanded me. And, I came back a different person. And my friends say, you're different. You've changed in I suppose, a good way. But yeah, it's a big world out there, Wally. How about you? I mean, you've got wings, you can fly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
How far out of your comfort zone have you grown?
Well, when you fly up as high as I do, the world always seems pretty small, I gotta say.
I can imagine. And you see a lot from way up there.
I
yes?
sure do. I sure
Yes.
absolutely do.
Yes.
Yeah, it's quite the test to be up there just flying so high.
Yes.
Just like it must have been quite the test for you to go over there.
It was quite a test for me. It wasn't easy because I had to change. I had to adjust and adapt. I had to wear an abaya. I had to adjust to certain norms and cultures and that were foreign to me. And I couldn't have bacon when I wanted bacon.
Oh, no.
I couldn't have a glass of wine when I wanted a glass of wine.
Wow.
But you adjust, you make the best of it. But working with those Saudi students over there was absolutely wonderful. And it was just a life-changing, unforgettable experience, really. Maybe one day and if I go back there, I'll take you with me and introduce you to some of them because I'm still connected with a lot of them today.
Oh, that sounds like a great idea.
They would just love you.
Oh, I would love to go
They
over
would
there too.
absolutely love you. But in the meantime, the word of wisdom of the day is to keep doing what you're doing. Get out of your comfort zone. Fly as high as you can. Let yourself soar and look and behold the beautiful world which is laid out before you. That's my word of wisdom today. Soar, fly, get out of your comfort zone.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, sure thing. I'm gonna fly super high today. Maybe I'll find some sky rats up there too. They gotta be flying around there up there somewhere.
Thanks for joining Seriously No BS. And if you'd like to learn more about us, please visit seriouslynobs.com. And we'd like to thank our audio engineers, Matt, Michael, and Jordan, and our production crew.